My name is Nathan, and I'm 21 years old. I've been working 2 jobs while studying full-time, often falling asleep with my textbooks open after 18-hour days. My relationship with my family has always been complicated, especially with my mother, who clearly favors my sister Amanda. Last month, at our regular family dinner, my dad casually asked if the monthly allowance was enough for me. The problem? I had no idea what allowance he was talking about. The look on his face when I said those words changed everything. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family betrayals and how I overcame them. I grew up in a upper-middle-class family in suburban Boston. My father, Robert, built his business from the ground up, selling industrial equipment to manufacturing companies across New England. His success came at a price, though. He was rarely home, often traveling 4 days a week, leaving my mother Elaine in charge of raising Amanda and me. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Nice house, 2 cars in the garage, family vacations once a year. But appearances can be deceiving. My mother Elaine comes from old money that had mostly dried up before she met my father. She grew up with expectations of a certain lifestyle and social status that she never quite achieved in her own right. When she married my father, she saw it as her chance to reclaim the life she believed she deserved. She's always been obsessed with appearances, constantly comparing our family to others in our social circle, particularly focusing on outward signs of success and status. Then there's my sister Amanda, 24 years old, 3 years older than me, and the absolute center of my mother's universe. From the time we were kids, Amanda could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. When we were younger, she got the bigger bedroom, newer clothes, and more attention. As we got older, the favoritism became even more obvious. Amanda was encouraged to pursue her dreams without concern for practicality. She developed an interest in fashion design, and my mother immediately declared her a prodigy, despite Amanda's mediocre grades in art classes. After high school, Amanda announced she wanted to study fashion in Paris. My mother was ecstatic despite the astronomical cost of tuition at the prestigious fashion school Amanda had set her sights on. My father had concerns about the expense, but was eventually convinced by my mother that this was Amanda's destiny. So, off she went to Paris with a generous monthly allowance to cover her networking expenses in addition to her tuition, apartment, and living costs. Meanwhile, I stayed local, attending community college to study business. I wasn't resentful of Amanda's opportunity. We had different interests anyway. I genuinely liked business and wanted to eventually work with my father or start my own company. What I didn't understand was why I was expected to be completely self-sufficient while Amanda was fully supported. I lived in a small apartment with 2 roommates in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, not because I wanted the authentic college experience as my mother claimed, but because it was all I could afford. I worked 35 hours weekly at a local coffee shop starting at 5 in the morning so I could attend afternoon classes. On weekends, I picked up shifts at a warehouse loading and unloading trucks for additional income. Between both jobs, I was working over 50 hours a week while maintaining a full course load. My typical day started at 4 in the morning. I'd drag myself out of bed, shower quickly, and bike 3 miles to the coffee shop regardless of weather. I'd work until 2, then bike to campus for classes until 7. After classes, I'd study in the library until they closed at 10, then bike home, often too exhausted to do more than microwave something quick before collapsing into bed. Weekends were devoted to warehouse work and catching up on assignments. The exhaustion was constant. Dark circles became a permanent feature under my eyes. I lost weight because I often forgot to eat or was too tired to prepare proper meals. Several times I caught myself nodding off while standing and making coffee. My grades were decent but not exceptional, not because I wasn't smart enough, but because I simply didn't have the time or energy to excel. My roommates sometimes asked why my parents weren't helping me more. I never had a good answer. They believe in self-reliance, I'd say, or they want me to appreciate the value of hard work. Deep down, I wondered the same thing, especially when I'd see Amanda's social media posts from Paris. Elegant cafes, fashion shows, weekend trips to the French Riviera. But I never questioned my parents directly. Part of me feared the answer, that they simply valued Amanda's dreams more than mine. Despite everything, I still showed up to the monthly family dinners at my parents' house. These elaborate affairs were my mother's way of maintaining the illusion of family unity. I dreaded them, knowing I'd spend the evening hearing about Amanda's latest adventures while my mother subtly criticized my appearance, my choice of major, or my lack of ambition. But I kept going, partly out of obligation, partly because I genuinely enjoyed seeing my father when he wasn't distracted by work, and partly because I still hoped that one day my hard work would earn my parents' respect. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, graduated with good grades, and started a successful career, my parents, especially my mother, would finally see my worth. Looking back, I can see how naive that hope was, but at 21, I still desperately wanted my parents' approval. I still believed I could earn their love through achievement and sacrifice. What I didn't realize was just how deep the favoritism ran, and how my mother's manipulation extended far beyond what I could see. I had no idea that the struggle I was experiencing was not just the result of neglect, but of active sabotage. That revelation would come soon enough, beginning with a simple question at a family dinner that would change everything. The day of that fateful dinner started like any other. I woke up at 4, worked my morning shift at the coffee shop, attended classes, and then rushed home to shower and change before heading to my parents' house. I was particularly exhausted that week. Finals were approaching, and I'd picked up extra shifts to cover a coworker's vacation. My right wrist was throbbing from a minor strain I'd gotten at the warehouse, and I'd caught myself nodding off during my afternoon lecture. I pulled up to my parents' colonial-style home in my 15-year-old Honda that perpetually smelled like coffee beans. The contrast between my car and my mother's new Mercedes in the driveway wasn't lost on me. Walking up to the house, I tried to put on a positive face despite my exhaustion. I'd learned long ago that showing weakness around my mother only invited criticism. "Nathan, you're late," my mother said, as she opened the door, not bothering with a greeting. I checked my watch. I was actually 5 minutes early. "And couldn't you have worn something nicer? Those jeans are practically threadbare." "Sorry, Mom," I replied, automatically too tired to argue. The jeans were worn but clean. The best I had after my nicer pair was ruined during a warehouse shift last month. I couldn't afford to replace them yet. The house smelled amazing. My father had probably cooked, as he often did when he was home. He appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Nathan, good to see you, son," he said, giving me a warm hug. Unlike my mother, he seemed genuinely happy to see me. "You look tired. Everything okay?" "Just busy with work and finals," I said with a shrug, not wanting to complain. "Well, sit down. Dinner's almost ready," my father said. "I made your favorite roast beef with those garlic potatoes you like." My mother's attention was already elsewhere. "Robert, did you set up the video call with Amanda? It's almost 9 in Paris, and she has that party to attend tonight." Soon we were seated at the dining table, my mother's tablet propped up at the empty 4th place where my sister would have sat. Amanda's face appeared on the screen, perfectly made up her apartment in Paris, visible in the background. "Amanda, darling. How are you?" my mother gushed, her entire demeanor transforming. "I'm fabulous, Mom. You won't believe who I met at the gallery opening last night. Jean-Paul Gaultier's assistant. She loved my portfolio sketches and said she might be able to arrange an introduction." The dinner conversation continued in this vein for nearly 30 minutes. Amanda describing parties, connections, and opportunities, my mother hanging on every word, my father occasionally asking a question. I ate quietly, half listening, half thinking about the essay I needed to finish when I got home. Finally, there was a lull in the Amanda show, and my father turned to me. "So Nathan, how are classes going? Are you still thinking about transferring to State University next year?" "If I can afford it," I said, nodding. "I've been saving and my grades are good enough for a partial scholarship, but the tuition is still steep." My father frowned slightly. "What about the allowance? Isn't that helping? Do you need more?" I looked at him blankly. What allowance? The moment those words left my mouth, the atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. My father's face went white. He looked at my mother, who suddenly became very interested in rearranging the food on her plate. "The monthly allowance," my father said slowly. "The $2,000 I've been setting aside for you every month since you turned 18. Your mother said you wanted it deposited into her account so she could help you manage it." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. $2,000, monthly, for 3 years. That was $72,000. Money that could have paid for my tuition, better housing, maybe even a reliable car. Money that would have meant I could work 1 job instead of 2, that I could get enough sleep, that I could actually focus on my studies. "I've never received any allowance," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. I turned to my mother. "Mom." My mother's face flushed, but she lifted her chin defensively. "Of course you have. I've been saving it for you, for your future. You're just not ready to manage that kind of money yet." Saving it where? My father asked, his voice unnaturally calm. "Nathan clearly hasn't seen any of it." "It's in a special account," my mother said quickly. "I was going to surprise him when he graduates. It's grown quite nicely with interest." On the tablet screen, Amanda had gone very quiet, her eyes darting between our parents. "So you have $72,000 plus interest saved for me?" I asked, not believing a word of it. "Can I see the account statements?" My mother's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate this interrogation at the dinner table. This is family time." "This is about family," my father said, his voice rising slightly. "Elaine, what have you been doing with Nathan's allowance?" The conversation devolved from there. My mother grew defensive, then angry. She accused me of being ungrateful, of trying to turn my father against her. She claimed the money was safe, that she was protecting me from my own irresponsibility. When pressed for details of this supposed savings account, she eventually stormed out of the room. I sat there, stunned and betrayed. 3 years of working myself to exhaustion, of skipping meals to save money, of watching my health deteriorate, all while money that was meant for me disappeared into some black hole. I looked at my father, who seemed as shocked as I was, though in a different way. He wasn't discovering this betrayal for the first time. He was discovering that he'd been complicit in it through his absence and trust in my mother. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. I mumbled some excuse and left, ignoring my father calling after me. I got into my car and just drove, no destination in mind, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Tears blurred my vision, and I eventually pulled over into an empty parking lot, unable to drive safely. The magnitude of the betrayal was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the money, though, that was significant. It was about years of struggling unnecessarily, of being made to feel like I wasn't worth supporting, of my mother's deliberate choice to make my life harder while pampering my sister. It was about the realization that my own mother had been actively undermining me while I desperately tried to earn her approval. I sat in my car for hours, alternating between rage, grief, and a strange sense of validation. The favoritism I'd always felt but tried to deny was real, more real than I'd ever imagined. Eventually I drove home, walked past my concerned roommates without a word, and collapsed into bed, physically and emotionally drained. But as exhausted as I was, sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced with questions, chief among them, where had my money gone? The next morning, I called in sick to the coffee shop for the first time in 2 years. I couldn't face making lattes and small talk while my entire world had been turned upside down. My phone showed 6 missed calls from my father, and 1 text: "We need to talk. Please call me." I stared at the ceiling of my small bedroom, trying to make sense of everything. Part of me wanted to believe my mother's story about saving the money for me. Maybe she really did have my best interests at heart, in her own twisted way. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for why I'd been left to struggle, while this phantom allowance accumulated in some account I knew nothing about. But deep down I knew better. The look on my father's face, my mother's defensive reaction, Amanda's suspicious silence, none of it suggested an innocent misunderstanding. After several hours of mental wrestling, I finally called my father back. He answered on the first ring. "Nathan, thank God. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at my apartment," I said flatly. "Dad, what's going on? What happened to that money?" "That's what I want to find out," he said, his voice grim. "Can we meet somewhere private to talk, not at the house?" We agreed to meet at a quiet diner near my apartment. When I arrived, my father was already there, looking like he hadn't slept at all. The normally confident businessman appeared diminished, somehow older and uncertain. "I've been up all night going through bank statements," he said without preamble as I slid into the booth across from him. Nathan, I'm so sorry. I should have been paying closer attention. He pushed a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of bank transfers. $2,000 transferred from my father's business account to my mother's personal account on the 1st of every month, dating back to my 18th birthday. The memo line on each one read Nathan's allowance. I set this up when you started college. My father explained, his voice heavy with regret. Amanda was getting support for school in Paris, and I wanted to be fair. Your mother suggested handling it this way since you were busy with school and work. She said you two had discussed it and agreed she would help manage it for you. I trusted her. I flipped through the statements, my throat tight. I never saw a penny of this, Dad. We never had any discussion about an allowance or her managing money for me. My father nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. I've requested statements from your mother's accounts using my access as a joint account holder. What I've found so far isn't good. He pulled out another set of papers. These showed transfers from my mother's account to an account in Paris, regular transfers of varying amounts, always adding up to approximately $4,000 per month. Amanda's allowance was supposed to be $2,000 monthly, same as yours, my father said quietly. I felt sick. So she's been sending my allowance to Amanda, on top of what Amanda already gets. It appears so, and there's more. The next set of documents showed credit card statements, designer clothes, exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to Monaco, Milan, and London, all charged to a card in my mother's name but apparently used by Amanda in Europe. I thought Amanda was being extravagant with her allowance, my father said. I mentioned it a few times, but your mother always defended her, saying she needed to look the part in the fashion world, that these were investments in her future. I had no idea she was spending your money too. I scrolled through Amanda's Instagram on my phone, seeing post after post of luxury purchases and exclusive events. A $3,000 handbag she'd gotten just because. A weekend at a 5-star hotel in Cannes. Front row seats at Paris Fashion Week. All while I was working 50-hour weeks, living on ramen, and falling asleep in class from exhaustion. $72,000, I whispered, the number hitting me anew. That's what was taken from me over 3 years. That could have paid for my entire degree at State University with money left over. My father couldn't meet my eyes. I'm so sorry, Nathan. This is my fault. I should have checked in with you directly about the money. I should have paid more attention. Part of me wanted to agree with him, to blame him for his absence and negligence. But the truth was more complicated. You were trying to be fair, I said finally. You thought you were supporting both of us equally. Mom is the one who deliberately deceived you and stole from me. What do you want to do? My father asked. I'll support whatever decision you make. If you want to confront your mother, press charges, whatever, I'll back you up. The mention of pressing charges startled me. I hadn't even thought about the legal implications, but my father was right. This was theft, plain and simple. Yet the idea of having my mother arrested regardless of what she'd done felt extreme. I want to confront her, I said. I want to hear her admit what she did and why. I want her to understand what it's done to me. And I want the money back. Not just for me, but I think Amanda needs to repay what she's taken too. My father nodded. That's fair. But Nathan, you should prepare yourself. Based on how your mother reacted last night, I don't think she feels she's done anything wrong. She may not give you the closure you're looking for. He was right, of course, but I needed to try. We spent the next few hours formulating a plan. My father would transfer the current month's allowance directly to an account in my name that he would help me set up. He would make it clear to my mother that all future support for both Amanda and me would come directly from him, and we would schedule a family meeting to address the misappropriated funds from the past 3 years. As I left the diner, I felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at my mother's betrayal, hurt that my sister had benefited from my suffering, relief that my father believed me and was taking action, and a strange sense of validation. All those years of feeling less valued than Amanda hadn't been in my head. The favoritism had been real, measurable in dollars and cents, documented in bank statements and credit card bills. That night I looked through old photos of our family, trying to pinpoint when things had gone wrong, when my mother had decided that Amanda deserved everything and I deserved nothing. But there was no single moment I could identify. The truth was probably that it had always been this way in ways too subtle for a child to recognize. Only now as an adult could I see the pattern clearly, and only because the evidence was irrefutable. 3 days after my meeting with my father, we scheduled the family confrontation. My father insisted it happen at a neutral location, not at their house where my mother controlled the environment, so we reserved a private room at a local restaurant. My mother arrived looking irritated at the inconvenience. I came armed with a folder of evidence and a determination to get answers. "I don't understand why we needed this dramatic meeting," my mother said as she sat down. "If Nathan needed money, he could have simply asked instead of making accusations." "This isn't about needing money now, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "This is about what happened to the allowance Dad has been providing for the past 3 years. As I already explained, I've been saving it for you," she said dismissively. "You should be thanking me for my financial prudence." I opened my folder and placed the bank statements on the table. "Then can you explain these transfers to Amanda's account in Paris? $4,000 monthly, when her allowance was supposed to be $2,000. My mother's expression flickered momentarily before settling back into practiced indignation. "Amanda has expenses you couldn't possibly understand. The fashion world requires a certain image, certain connections. Those things cost money. So you decided that her image was worth more than my education, my health, my basic needs," I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Don't be so dramatic," Nathan, my mother scoffed. "You've always been independent and resourceful. Amanda is more delicate. She needs more support." "Delicate," I echoed in disbelief. "I've been working 50-hour weeks on top of full-time classes. I've lost 20 pounds this year because I often can't afford proper meals after paying rent. I fell asleep driving home last month because I was so exhausted." "And look how well you've turned out," my mother replied as if this proved her point. "You're strong, self-sufficient. Amanda wouldn't have survived your circumstances. I did what was best for both of you." The conversation continued in this maddening circle. No matter what evidence I presented, my mother had a justification. Amanda needed designer clothes for networking. She required luxury accommodations to make the right impressions. Her weekend trips to European capitals were essential industry events. Meanwhile, according to my mother, my struggles were character-building experiences that were ultimately good for me. My exhaustion was just a lack of proper time management. My financial hardship was due to my own poor planning, not the theft of my allowance. When I pointed out that the money had been specifically designated for me by my father, she waved this away. "A family's resources should go where they're most needed and will do the most good. I made an executive decision as your mother." My father, who had been quietly letting me lead the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Elaine, what you did was not only wrong but potentially illegal. You diverted funds that weren't yours to divert. You lied to me about Nathan's wishes. You watched him struggle unnecessarily for years." My mother's face hardened. "I don't appreciate being ganged up on like this. If you two are going to align against me, I think Amanda should be part of this conversation too." Without waiting for a response, she pulled out her phone and initiated a video call to my sister. Amanda answered, looking like she'd just woken up despite it being afternoon in Paris. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, her voice slightly slurred. Was she drunk? At 2 in the afternoon her time. "Your brother and father are attacking me about the financial arrangements we've made for you," my mother said dramatically. "They seem to think I've done something wrong by supporting your career." "Financial arrangements," I cut in. "You mean the fact that you've been sending her my allowance on top of her own. Did you know about this, Amanda?" My sister's expression was all the answer I needed. She knew. Maybe not the specifics, maybe not the exact amount, but she knew she was receiving more than she was supposed to. "I need that money," she said defensively. "Do you have any idea how expensive it is to live in Paris, to dress appropriately for industry events, to network with the right people? Do you have any idea what it's like to work 2 jobs while studying full-time?" I shot back. "To choose between buying textbooks or eating dinner, to fall asleep standing up because you're so exhausted from working to support yourself." "That's different," Amanda said dismissively. "Your situation isn't as demanding as mine. Fashion is an elite world. Appearances matter. And my education doesn't." My health doesn't. The argument escalated from there, with Amanda echoing my mother's justifications. According to them, Amanda's career aspirations were simply more important, more prestigious, more valuable than mine. The unspoken implication was clear: Amanda was more important, more valuable than me. The confrontation ended with nothing resolved. My mother refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Amanda felt entitled to every penny she'd received. My father tried to mediate, but ultimately couldn't bridge the gap between such fundamentally different perspectives on what had happened. As the weeks went on, the conflict continued to simmer. My father made good on his promise to transfer my allowance directly to me, which provided immediate relief from my financial pressure. I was able to quit the warehouse job and reduce my coffee shop hours, giving me more time to focus on school and take care of my health. But the damage to my relationship with my mother and sister was severe. Family dinners became tense affairs when they happened at all. My mother alternated between cold silence and passive-aggressive comments about my betrayal of the family. Amanda, when she called in from Paris, acted as if I was threatening her very existence by questioning the financial arrangements. The stress began to take a physical toll. I developed insomnia, lying awake at night, replaying conversations and arguments in my head. My appetite, already diminished from years of stress and overwork, deteriorated further. Even with a reduced work schedule, I found myself more exhausted than ever, the emotional strain draining my energy more effectively than physical labor ever had. Old memories surfaced with new context. The time my mother forgot to pick me up from soccer practice in the rain but drove Amanda 40 miles to a dance audition. The Christmas when Amanda received a new laptop while I got secondhand clothes. The college tours my mother enthusiastically arranged for Amanda while telling me community college was more practical for my goals. What I had interpreted as occasional oversight or differing needs I now recognized as a consistent pattern of favoritism that had shaped my entire life. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of that recognition, the anger, the hurt, the sense of betrayal, not just from recent events, but from a lifetime of being valued less. 6 weeks after the confrontation, the physical and emotional toll finally caught up with me. I was working a morning shift at the coffee shop, having slept only 2 hours the night before due to studying for finals. The world seemed to be moving in slow-motion sounds, reaching me as if through water. I had just handed a customer their change when the floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "Hey, are you okay?" the customer asked, their voice distant and echoing. I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't form. The last thing I remember is the ceiling spinning above me before everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, and the steady beep of monitors filling the room. My first coherent thought was panic about missing work, followed immediately by worry about the medical bills. Even with my improved financial situation, an emergency room visit would set me back significantly. "He's awake," I heard someone say, and then my father's face appeared in my field of vision. "Nathan, thank God," he said, gripping my hand. "How do you feel?" "Tired," I managed to say, my voice raspy. "What happened?" "You collapsed at work," my father explained. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and malnourishment, according to the doctor. Your body essentially shut down." A doctor came in shortly after, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She explained that my collapse wasn't just from recent stress, but from years of pushing my body beyond its limits. "Your blood work shows chronic vitamin deficiencies consistent with long-term poor nutrition," she said, reviewing my chart. "Your cortisol levels are through the roof, indicating prolonged stress. And based on what your coworkers told the paramedics, you've been working yourself far too hard for far too long." She fixed me with a stern look. "This isn't sustainable. If you continue on this path, you'll do permanent damage to your health. You need rest, proper nutrition, and a significant reduction in stress." My father nodded seriously. "He'll get it, doctor. I'll make sure of it." After the doctor left, my father sat beside my bed, looking more shaken than I'd ever seen him. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. I had no idea things had gotten this bad." "It's not your fault," I said automatically. "It is," he insisted. "I'm your father. I should have been paying attention. I got so caught up in growing the business and providing financially that I failed to see what was happening right in front of me." We talked for hours as I drifted in and out of sleep. He told me that my mother had been informed of my hospitalization but had declined to come, claiming she had an important charity committee meeting. Amanda had sent a brief text, saying she hoped I felt better soon, but was swamped with final projects. Their absence hurt, but it also clarified things for me. In a moment of genuine crisis, when I was at my most vulnerable, neither my mother nor my sister could be bothered to show up. Their priorities were crystal clear. While I was recovering in the hospital, more revelations came to light. A coworker from the coffee shop visited and mentioned something that caught my attention. "Your mom called the shop a few times over the past year," she said casually. "She was always checking your schedule, asking if you were picking up extra shifts." This struck me as odd. My mother had never shown interest in my work schedule before. Why would she be checking? With my father's help, I began to dig deeper. What we discovered was disturbing. My mother hadn't just been passively allowing me to struggle. She had been actively ensuring it. We found emails where she had contacted potential employers who had interviewed me for better paying less, physically demanding jobs, giving negative references. She had called my current employers regularly, not out of concern but to verify I was working the hours she expected. There were even messages to my academic advisor, suggesting I wasn't ready for a full course load, attempting to interfere with my class registration. The most damning evidence came from my mother's own email account, which my father accessed as they shared a family email domain. In messages to her friends, my mother spoke of Amanda's remarkable success in Paris, taking credit for supporting her daughter's dream. In the same emails, she described me as finding his way through hard work, positioning my struggles as a positive character-building experience that she was orchestrating. "Nathan is learning the value of hard work, unlike so many entitled young people today," she wrote to a friend. "I could make things easier for him, of course, but that wouldn't serve him in the long run. Amanda needs our support for her exceptional talent, while Nathan benefits from developing grit and resilience." Reading those words from my hospital bed, something broke inside me. This wasn't just favoritism or neglect. It was deliberate sabotage. My mother had been actively working to keep me struggling, not because she couldn't help me, not because she thought it was truly best for me, but because my struggles made for a convenient narrative that cast her as a wise parent, while allowing her to funnel all support to Amanda. That was the moment I realized I needed to make a fundamental change in my life. Not just in my financial situation or work schedule, but in my relationship with my family, particularly my mother. As long as I remained under her influence, she would find ways to undermine me, to keep me in the role she had assigned the struggling son, whose hardships made Amanda's privilege seem earned rather than unfairly granted. As I lay in that hospital bed, tubes in my arms and monitors tracking my vital signs, I made a decision. I would no longer seek my mother's approval. I would no longer participate in the family dynamic she had created. I would take control of my life, set boundaries, and rebuild based on what was actually good for me, not what fit her narrative. It was both terrifying and liberating. For 21 years I had defined myself in relation to my family, seeking validation I now understood would never come. Letting go of that meant stepping into unknown territory, becoming someone new, someone defined by his own values, rather than by his mother's withholding of approval. The doctor kept me in the hospital for 3 days, insisting I needed complete rest before returning to normal life, though she made it clear that my previous normal was not something I should return to. When I was discharged, my father drove me back to my apartment and helped me up the stairs. "I'm going to help you find a better place to live," he said, looking around at my cramped, run-down apartment. "Somewhere closer to campus, safer with proper heating. And I want you to quit at least one of your jobs. Focus on school and your health." "Dad, you don't have to," I began. "I want to," he interrupted. "I should have done this years ago. Let me do it now." As he helped me settle in bringing groceries and making sure I had everything I needed, I saw genuine remorse in my father's eyes, but also determination. He had failed me before, but he was committed to not failing me again. And for the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to accept help without feeling guilty or undeserving. That night after my father left, I sat in my small apartment and began to plan. Not just for my recovery, but for my new life. One where I valued myself, even if my mother never would. My recovery was slow but steady. For the first week after my hospitalization, I did little but sleep, eat the nutritious meals my father arranged to be delivered, and reflect on the changes I needed to make. The physical rest was necessary, but the mental and emotional processing was equally important. I formally quit my warehouse job and reduced my coffee shop hours to just 2 mornings a week, enough to maintain some income and independence, but not enough to interfere with my health or studies. My father increased my direct monthly allowance to $2,500, which covered my basic expenses and allowed me to build some savings. With my father's help, I found a new apartment closer to campus in a safer neighborhood. It was a small, 1-bedroom, nothing fancy, but it had reliable heating, no mold, and a quiet environment conducive to studying. Moving out of my old place felt symbolically important, a physical representation of the changes I was making in my life. 2 weeks after my collapse, I was ready to face my mother again. My father arranged a meeting at their house, though he promised to be present the entire time. When I arrived, my mother greeted me with a performance of maternal concern. "Nathan, darling, you look so thin. Are you taking care of yourself?" she asked, as if my hospitalization had been some random occurrence rather than the direct result of years of her actions. I didn't play along with the charade. "Mom, we need to talk about what happens next," I said firmly. "Things are going to be different going forward." Seated in the living room, I laid out the boundaries I had decided upon during my recovery. "I'm going to be reducing contact for a while. I need space to heal and focus on my health and education. Dad will be supporting me directly, and I'll be making my own decisions about my finances, my education, and my life." My mother's face hardened. "This is about the allowance again, isn't it? You're still punishing me for trying to protect you from yourself." "This isn't punishment," I said calmly. "This is me taking care of myself. You've shown through your actions that you don't have my best interests at heart. You actively work to make my life harder while favoring Amanda. I can't trust you right now, and I won't pretend otherwise. After everything I've done for you," my mother began, her voice rising, "the sacrifices I've made." "What sacrifices, Mom?" I interrupted. "Please tell me specifically what you've sacrificed for me, because from where I'm sitting, you've sacrificed my well-being for Amanda's privilege. You've sacrificed my health for your narrative about building character. Those aren't your sacrifices, they're mine." My mother tried several tactics: guilt, anger, even tears. But I remained firm. This wasn't a negotiation. It was me informing her of decisions I'd already made. My father, true to his word, supported me throughout the conversation, occasionally adding his own perspective, but mostly allowing me to speak for myself. The next confrontation was with Amanda, which happened over video call the following week. Unlike my mother, Amanda initially tried to avoid the conversation, entirely claiming she was too busy with end-of-semester projects to discuss family drama. "This isn't drama, Amanda," I said. "This is about accountability. You've been receiving my allowance on top of your own for 3 years. You had to know that wasn't right." "Mom said Dad wanted me to have it," she replied defensively. "That he thought my career needed the extra investment." "Did you ever ask Dad directly about that?" I pressed. Her silence was answer enough. "I'm not asking you to come home or drop out," I continued. "But I am asking you to acknowledge what happened and take some responsibility. That money was meant for my education and living expenses. I worked myself to the point of hospitalization while you were using my allowance for luxury shopping and weekend trips." Amanda's expression shifted from defensive to uncomfortable. For perhaps the first time, she seemed to truly consider the situation from my perspective. "I didn't know you were struggling that much," she said quietly. "Mom always said you were doing fine, that you preferred to be independent." "Would you have done anything differently if you had known?" I asked. She looked away from the camera. "I don't know. I'd like to think I would have, but I've gotten used to living a certain way." It wasn't the full accountability I'd hoped for, but it was more honesty than I'd expected. We ended the call with an agreement that she would start repaying what she had received from my allowance. Not all at once, but in monthly installments after she graduated and found employment. With these difficult conversations behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. I transferred from community college to state university for the spring semester using my improved financial situation and the partial scholarship I'd earned. My father helped cover the remaining tuition and made it clear that supporting my education was a priority for him. With a reduced work schedule and adequate rest, my academic performance improved dramatically. I went from being a B.C. student constantly fighting exhaustion to making the dean's list my first semester at state. My health improved as well. I gained back the weight I had lost, the constant headaches and fatigue receded, and I began to feel like myself again, though a new version of myself, stronger and more self-assured. The monthly family dinners became a thing of the past. Instead, I met with my father regularly, sometimes for meals, sometimes just for coffee between his meetings. Our relationship strengthened as we rebuilt it on more honest foundations. He shared more about his own struggles growing up, his regrets about being absent during my childhood, and his hopes for our relationship moving forward. "I was trying to give you and Amanda everything I didn't have growing up," he told me during one of our conversations. "But in focusing so much on providing financially, I missed what was happening emotionally. I won't make that mistake again." My relationship with my mother remained distant but civil. She never fully acknowledged the harm she had caused, maintaining that she had acted with good intentions. But with my father's support and my own newfound confidence, her approval no longer seemed as important as it once had. I could see her behavior for what it was, the actions of someone with her own deep insecurities and flawed perspectives, not a reflection of my worth. As for Amanda, our relationship entered a strange new phase. After her initial reluctance to accept responsibility, she seemed to undergo a period of reflection. Her social media posts became less frequent and less focused on showcasing luxury. When we did speak, she asked more questions about my life and shared less about the glamorous aspects of hers. 6 months after my hospitalization, I received an unexpected call from her. I've been thinking a lot about everything she said without preamble. About how differently we were treated, about the money, about how Mom pitted us against each other without us even realizing it. "What brought this on?" I asked, surprised by her introspection. "My funding got cut," she admitted. "Dad told Mom he wouldn't be sending her any more money for me beyond my regular allowance, directly to me now, not through her. Suddenly I'm having to budget to make choices about what I can afford. And I realized, this is what you were doing all along, except with way less money and way more responsibilities." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start, a crack in the family mythology that had shaped both our lives. And as I continued to heal and grow stronger, I found that validation from my sister, while welcome, was no longer necessary for my sense of self-worth. 1 year after that fateful family dinner where everything began to unravel, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. I was thriving at State University, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while working just one part-time job that I actually enjoyed, tutoring business students. I lived in a comfortable apartment, had developed a solid group of friends, and most importantly, had reclaimed my health and well-being. My relationship with my father had become one of mutual respect and genuine connection. He had made good on his promises, supporting me financially and emotionally, while respecting my independence. We spoke almost daily, sometimes about school or work, sometimes about deeper topics we had never discussed before. He had become not just my parent, but my ally and friend. My mother remained a more complicated presence in my life. 6 months after our confrontation, she had reluctantly agreed to see a therapist at my father's insistence. The process seemed to be giving her some insight into her behavior, though change came slowly and with resistance. She still struggled to fully acknowledge the harm she had caused, but she had at least stopped actively undermining me. During a carefully planned lunch with her, our first one-on-one meeting in months, she made what for her was a significant concession. "I may not have always made the right choices in how I parented you, and Amanda," she said stiffly. "I wanted what was best, but perhaps I didn't always know what that was." Coming from my mother, this vague acknowledgement was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. I accepted it for what it was. Not full accountability, but a small step toward a more honest relationship. "I'm not looking for perfection, Mom," I replied. "Just recognition that I deserve the same support and consideration as Amanda, and that working myself to exhaustion wasn't some valuable character-building exercise. It was harmful and unnecessary. She nodded tightly, but didn't argue. Progress by our standards. The most surprising change came from Amanda. After her funding was cut, she initially struggled to adjust to a more modest lifestyle in Paris. But rather than giving up and coming home as my mother had feared, she adapted. She found a part-time job at a local boutique, learned to budget, and became more selective about which industry events were truly worth attending. When she graduated from fashion school, she didn't immediately land a high-profile position as she had always assumed she would. Instead, she found an entry-level job at a smaller fashion house working long hours for modest pay, not unlike what I had been doing for years. "I get it now," she told me during one of our now regular video calls. "Why you were so angry. I used to think you were just jealous of my opportunities, but now I understand it wasn't about that. It was about fairness, about Mom, manipulating both of us in different ways." Amanda had begun repaying me as promised, sending small monthly transfers that she calculated carefully from her limited income. The amount was symbolic, more than substantial, but the gesture mattered more than the money. "I'm sorry I benefited from your suffering," she said during one particularly honest conversation. "I can't claim I didn't know something was wrong, but it was easier to believe Mom's version of events than to question why I deserved so much more support than you." This new, more self-aware version of my sister was someone I could actually relate to, maybe even eventually build a real relationship with. The playing field between us had leveled somewhat, allowing us to see each other as people rather than as the roles our mother had assigned us. As for the family money, my father had completely restructured how he handled finances. Amanda and I now received identical allowances transferred directly to our personal accounts. Major expenses like tuition were paid directly by him, after discussion with each of us. My mother's access to the family finances had been significantly restricted after my father discovered additional financial improprieties beyond what had happened with my allowance. The $72,000 that had been diverted from me over those 3 years, my father had calculated the exact amount, including interest, and deposited it into an investment account in my name. "This can't undo the strain you experienced," he said, when he showed me the account. "But it can help secure your future." I used a small portion to pay off the medical bills from my hospitalization and kept the rest invested for graduate school, or perhaps eventually starting my own business. The money itself mattered less than what it represented: acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done, and a concrete step toward making it right. Beyond the practical changes in my circumstances, the most significant transformation was internal. I no longer defined my worth by my mother's approval or by comparison to my sister. I had learned to value myself independently of my family's dysfunction, to trust my own perceptions, and to set boundaries that protected my well-being. I had also developed a more nuanced understanding of my parents as flawed individuals, rather than the idealized or demonized figures I had seen before. My father was neither the perfect provider nor the negligent absentee. He was a man who had made mistakes but was genuinely trying to do better. My mother was neither the wise parent nor the heartless villain. She was someone with her own deep insecurities who had caused real harm but wasn't beyond the capacity for growth. This perspective didn't excuse what had happened, but it helped me move forward without being consumed by anger or resentment. I could acknowledge the pain of the past without letting it determine my future. I also found myself becoming a resource for friends who were dealing with their own family issues. My experience had given me insight that proved valuable to others struggling with favoritism, financial manipulation, or toxic family dynamics. Being able to help others navigate similar situations gave additional meaning to what I had endured. One evening, as I was finishing a paper for my business ethics class, I received a text from a friend I had been helping through a difficult family situation. "Just wanted to say thanks for your advice. Set boundaries with my dad like you suggested. It was hard but feels right. How did you get so wise about this stuff?" I smiled at the message, thinking about how to respond. The truth was, wisdom had come at a high price. Years of struggle, a physical collapse, and the painful dismantling of family myths. But from those experiences had come strength, clarity, and a deeper understanding of myself and others. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most, I texted back. The key is to learn from them without becoming bitter. And that perhaps was the most important lesson of all. What had happened to me, the favoritism, the theft, the gaslighting, had been genuinely wrong. But I had found a way to acknowledge that wrong, without letting it define me, to set boundaries, without cutting off the possibility of healing, to value myself, even when others had failed to do so. As I closed my textbook and looked around my comfortable apartment, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The journey had been painful, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ultimately free. Not just financially independent, but emotionally liberated from the need for validation that had driven me for so long. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, and my family relationships would likely always require careful navigation. But for the first time, I was walking that path on my terms, guided by my own values, rather than by the dysfunction that had shaped my earlier years. If you've ever experienced family favoritism or financial manipulation, I hope my story helps you recognize that you're not alone. Have you ever discovered a betrayal that made you question everything about your family relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve fairness and respect, even from family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose can heal the wounds caused by the family we're born into.